We're here with Maureen Mullen, co-founder and chief strategy officer of L2, and an annual rite of passage for us is to revisit our predictions that we make and make some new ones. Maureen, good to see you. So, first prediction. Amazon surpasses Apple in valuation. And actually, for about 2 minutes last week, we were right. And to pat ourselves on the back, we've been saying this for a while and said it when I think Amazon was about a third of the value of Apple. So this has worked out. Any thoughts around kind of the change in the ecosystem and what's led to this?
Well, obviously, it was a huge year from a valuation standpoint. We've been predicting for a while that Apple was going to be the first company to reach $1 trillion. About 3 years ago, as you referenced, we switched and said we thought Amazon was actually going to be the first. And this year, we've had both reach over $1 trillion in market capitalization. And you know, if you look at sort of the underlying fundamentals, Apple's doing about $280 billion in revenue. Amazon is not even half, about half that. So, you know, if you look at analysts, they think the Apple $1 trillion number, you know, feels about right, although they took a hit yesterday. But Amazon, you know, still very much building its valuation based on stories.
So Apple, ultimate luxury brand, the best, and we've never seen margins like that at the scale of that. It's the most profitable company in history. The gangster move, going into stores, you know, seeing that brand building was moving from broadcast to stores, 700 or 600 temples to the brand. Amazon, a different story though, right? Break even, but recurring revenue, AWS, and they seem to just have a bunch. They've kind of blown the notion of core competence out of the water. They just do everything really well. AWS, the biggest cloud company, now Amazon Media Group, another juggernaut. So, and also I would argue Amazon is arguably the most, it gets probably another 3 to 5 turns, or not even that, 30 to 50 turns on EBITDA, because management is perceived as the best management team in the world right now.
Absolutely.
So I think we said we got it wrong. I would say we kind of sort of got it right. Another prediction, next big thing, Alexa. That feels like we kind of, I mean, it seems obvious now, but it seems like we got that very right. Voice, big deal. Any thoughts on voice?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And when you look at device adoption, not just of Alexa, but Google Home and all of the investment that's pouring into voice, I think there's no question. Voice is the next mobile phone. We haven't seen a transformative interface really since we've seen the iPhone launch kind of back in 2007. That said, I think where voice has been a bit of a disappointment is actually leading to commerce enablement. And I think, you know, Amazon would have expected consumer adoption. They've put in all sorts of incentives to shop via Alexa, particularly during Prime Day, and the numbers just haven't panned out yet.
CPG firms unite to fight voice.
That hasn't really happened.
They haven't really consolidated.
CPG actually is doing remarkably well in 2018, particularly.
We were talking about this last night. Why is that? I wouldn't have predicted. I've been such a Debbie Downer in front of the Unilevers and the P&Gs in the world, and they've had a really good year. Why?
Well, I think, first and foremost, I think everybody thinks of these large legacy enterprises as befuddled prey. The reality is there's a ton of innovation that's happening there. I mean, P&G in particular, early innovator, was flying out to Seattle in the late 90s to meet with Bezos long before, you know, Amazon was even looking at CPG as a category. What's been interesting is, you know, the sort of tried and true numbers of CPG firms have been the Nielsen market share numbers, but they don't incorporate some of these new channels of distribution, including things like direct-to-consumer e-commerce, as well as the Amazon, Walmart.com. A lot of those numbers aren't necessarily fully baked into the Nielsen numbers. So you've seen a lot of earnings releases where analysts have actually gotten it wrong.
On the top line.
Yeah, on the top line, because they haven't necessarily seen the sales growth coming out of these growth channels.
Ad tech market surrenders to Facebook and Google. I think we got this right. We're living in a duopoly. There is no ad tech firm that works other than these two, and now it's digital media, Refinery 1099, Vox, BuzzFeed. I mean, it feels like they're all sort of the walking dead. Amazon Media Group revenue surpasses Twitter and Oath. This seemed fairly provocative at the time, and now it's kind of obvious. This is the next big juggernaut. Morgan Stanley said they were going to do $4.5 billion. It looks like they're going to do 11. They could be the third largest digital media company in the world in 24 to 36 months, and no one ever talks about it. Talk about how they're able to extract these kind of rents from some of those CPG firms and other brands.
This is actually something we've been predicting all the way back to kind of 2012, 2013, when, Amazon's media business really was the redheaded stepchild of the firm. It was kind of, a lot of ad sales guys in New York. Jeff Bezos didn't have a ton of focus on it. But it makes a ton of sense. The only place you can get closer to the point of purchase and closer to kind of the web of intent than Google is on Amazon. And they've done a fantastic job of, one, kind of getting brands addicted to 50, 100, 300% growth, but then also getting them addicted to actually paying for that growth via both Amazon Media Services and Amazon Media Group. So their revenues are expected to grow about 400% next year, which is
400% next year.
Astronomical.
That's incredible. We said, or we every year we like to pick a fifth horseman, or we like to pick a stock. I'm not supposed to pick stocks. Hello, Gartner. But we call it the fifth horseman. Last year it was Netflix. This year we said Disney. Fifth horseman, we don't really know yet, right?
I think not yet, but Disney, I think by all, last year sort of firing on all cylinders, announced sort of the acquisition of 20th Century Fox. And we really thought, they were going to come out of the gate swinging. What's been interesting about their media offering is it's been much more parsed. They have plans for kind of a Netflix rival, but it seems like the early offerings have been, let's package ESPN in this way. Let's
rather than one big offering, Disneyflix.
And it feels a little bit under-inspired.
Facebook stock peaks. We nailed this. I mean, Facebook had been going up 40% a year, and it absolutely peaked, and it's off about a third of its value.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because despite all of the negative press on Facebook, despite the constant kind of barrage in front of Congress and what have you, you don't really see advertisers pulling back. And I think it goes kind of with the first point that we were making, which is really if you're advertising from a digital standpoint, you kind of have
options?
two, maybe three choices. It's Google, it's Facebook, and then Amazon kind of a distant third. So, I think it's been really interesting when we, look back at, 10 years now of predictions, we always thought there'd be a consumer company that pulled away with a ton of data competence. The reality is I don't think there's any competitive advantage in data-driven marketing on the consumer side. It's really been two companies that have benefited. It's been Google and it's been Facebook.
Walmart, we said, and this was a boring prediction, but it was probably, I would argue, our best one. Walmart becomes the online grocery leader. And this was in the face of this conventional wisdom that Amazon and Whole Foods were literally going to take over our refrigerators. And it feels like we got this right. Why has Walmart been so successful with online grocery?
Well, it seems kind of obvious in retrospect, but Walmart was really the first retailer that said, hey, we can't compete head-to-head with Amazon on delivery. In fact, if we look at the underlying kind of economics of what they're trying to do with Fresh, they just don't make sense. But we have this amazing asset called stores, and we're going to set up a pickup program. And not only, they've rolled out pickup now nationwide. They've done a fantastic job of communicating the value proposition to consumers through extensive national advertising. And they're continuing to innovate on that model. They're actually going to have pickup towers in about 700 of their stores by the end of the year. And they've really kind of picked, I think, a core staple grocery, which is probably the least innovative business of the last 30 years.
Biggest market in the world, right?
And I mean, if you think about it, what's the worst thing about Walmart? It's actually entering the store. They've kind of taken that out of the ecosystem, so have been able to attract a much more affluent consumer.
I said the same thing down in Bentonville. It didn't go over really well. We said Wayfair would crash. We were wrong on this. It has not crashed. Wayfair, I don't know what I have against this company. It reminds me of the .coms. I look at the customer acquisition cost, the lifetime value of the CAC, and it just doesn't make any sense. Let's talk about, we were talking about this last night, all of these guys that get a ton of press. The only one we think might get out of the gates is Warby Parker. And that we're talking about Casper feels like the wheels are starting to come off. All the, Parachute, all these different little things that everyone tries to get excited about, but very few of them have managed to really break through.
Yeah, I mean, I think online pure play retail just has been a massive disappointment. Now, it's not to say that it hasn't, consistently taken 3 to 5 kind of points of market share every single year with new companies popping up, some of these, single category giants that just massively spend on customer acquisition. And, Wayfair has absolutely kind of completely disrupted
saving
the
broadcast
furniture.
TV.
Yeah, and disrupted the furniture industry. But I think the reality is when you look at the sustainability technology, these business models, the underlying economics just aren't there. So it's going to be, the other one, Warby Parker, if you look at what they've done well, it isn't necessarily, I think, anything digital. They were in a category that was absolutely dominated by a behemoth, Luxottica, who really, for all intents and purposes, was stuck in the dark ages. And frankly, they have a great merchandising lens, and it's a category where consumers are willing to go in and buy 3 pairs of glasses and frequently kind of replenish because they're either losing them or looking for kind of new styles. The other one that we're a little bit bullish on, I think, from the luxury industry is Farfetch, because they've kind of changed the model. Now, their valuation is astronomical right now, but
what about the RealReal?
The RealReal, I mean, I think any time you're accessing kind of alternative marketplaces, what the RealReal does is they really don't hold any inventory. And they're tapping into kind of this massive demand for millennials and even younger consumers for luxury goods at a fraction of the price.
Under leveraged assets is set in your class. By the way, I got this from RealReal, and I feel good saying about that. I got this from Wayfair, said nobody cool ever. Snap, Twitter, BuzzFeed, or Pinterest acquired. I think this was me, not you, and it was wrong. What's going on here?
Well, there's still rumors that Pinterest is going to go public. I feel like that rumor happens every year around this time, but it does look like they have generated.
You talked about the places people are spending. Are people spending on Pinterest? I just never hear anyone talk about it. It feels like they have a defensible moat. No one's directly attacking them the same way Facebook is putting Snap out of business. It's the Walking Dead. But it feels like Pinterest has found a home, has found a niche. But you and I meet with the biggest advertisers in the world, and I don't hear anybody saying we're spending more on Pinterest. I don't even hear anyone say we're spending anything on Pinterest.
Well, it's interesting. I think, one, what's defensible about their strategy is they're kind of the anti-millennial social media platform. So while Snap just chased consumers that were younger and younger and younger and also incredibly fickle, I think Pinterest does have a lot of loyalists. Their mobile app and what they've been able to do via visual search, I mean, there is some real technology in there. And there's rumors that their advertising revenue is set to double and almost hit $1 billion this year. We'll see.
Real company, right? I wonder if they might get attacked from below. House going after verticals with a little more focused niche offering. We'll see. Amazon acquires Nordstrom and Carrefour. Again, another one of mine. Wrong. Do you think this still might happen?
I think it's interesting. I think Amazon, if you look at sort of their report card on Whole Foods, I think it's probably been like a solid B.
B.
Fantastic from a buzz standpoint, fantastic from really, I think, launching sort of an onslaught on the grocery industry, particularly one of the largest players, Kroger. But if you look at what's actually happened from an integration standpoint, some interesting things around Prime Day. You do see the Prime brand now in Whole Foods stores. It does offer some new pickup points for consumers in urban areas, but it definitely hasn't transformed grocery, and Amazon doesn't seem to be that much further along on fresh than they were kind of 18 months ago. Now, I think that all lends itself to, I would say Amazon's more compelling retail concept is what they're doing with some of their pop-up stores, where they're actually using Amazon ratings and reviews to merchandise a pretty interesting assortment and driving a ton of buzz, kind of almost sniper type retail, where, publishing things like Mrs. Maisel, they're using that to...
We were talking about last night, that reprisal of the Carnegie Deli to create buzz for Miss Maisel. Oh my gosh, there's a line around the block for it. Just genius. Whoever at Amazon came up with that. Granted, you're evil and you're bad for the planet, but you're creative. Cryptocurrency crash. Boom! We got that right. Next slide. M&A activity booms. I think we got that right. One of the only ways you can fight back against these monopolies is to consolidate and scale. Poland makes first appearance in World Cup final. You said that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry about that. My son's a big fan of Poland. We did not fare well out in the first round. Europe bans Amazon, Apple, Facebook, or Google. I think we got this. I think you have this sort of, Europe's going gangster. They get a fraction of the upside with all of the downside. Yeah. They are going after the four. I've described it as reverse D-Day. I think Europe is saving us from this tyranny of technology because my sense is the legislature there, the governments just aren't scared of these guys. They have less to lose. Amazon doesn't have 88 full-time lobbyists in Brussels. They have them in D.C. I think that's gonna continue. Now we're sort of into predictions. We think that a country might outright ban one or more of the four. You get an Uruguay or an Italy. They look at China, who let them in just long enough to steal their IP, prop up a local entrepreneur, capture all the value. It feels like, who are the idiots here, Italy or Chinese? I think a nation is going to decide, we're going Chinese. We're going to come up with our own tech companies and steal your IP. We're sick of you guys. There's been an uncoupling in big tech, similar to, we were talking about yesterday, you had a great slide, LVMH, Kering Group, and Prada. And basically there's been an uncoupling there. They used to move in sympathy with one another. And just as the big four have broken apart and Facebook's gone down, Amazon continues to go up, Prada has broken away to the downside. And you had an interesting theory on why Prada's broken away from the rest of the
Prada has been interesting because, it has been the digital laggard in luxury probably for the last decade.
Yeah, we've been saying they're terrible and it's going to haunt you.
And I think that haunt has kind of
finally happened.
And there's kind of two sides to the story. One, they're remarkably underinvested in digital, and they'd actually be the first to say that. But two, because they've underinvested in digital, they actually likely overinvested in building stores, particularly on the Chinese mainland where they have a ton of overexposure.
Interesting thought. Apple pulling away in terms of PR, absolutely. The seminal moment was that MSNBC interview with Kara Swisher where he said that we believe privacy is a fundamental human right, and all of a sudden he's kind of starched their hat white. We think there's a chance, and kind of our big prediction for 19 or 20 is that AWS is spun, and that on the spin, AWS becomes one of the 10 most valuable companies in the world, as there's no pure play way to play the cloud right now.
It's kind of like eBay, PayPal a couple years ago.
A great spin, right?
PayPal made a ton of sense to be separate because a lot of retailers want to use PayPal, but they don't necessarily want eBay to get any of their data. And I see the same kind of relationship between AWS and Amazon.
And AWS has traditionally been the cash cow that's enabled Amazon to engage in modern day steel dumping with their retail unit. And they have the new profit generator in Amazon Media Group. So they can afford kind of to lose AWS, if you will. Instagram spin. Do you think that could happen?
I think Facebook won't do that unless they're forced to. I think Instagram, arguably the best technology acquisition of the last decade. Everybody thought that was a silly acquisition. If you really look at any social media companies that have been created post-2005, Instagram is, outside of China, the single only successful company and arguably the most successful.
And then most powerful process, we talk about Google. It just seems weird that a company with somewhere between 90 and 93% share hasn't received more scrutiny. We wonder if antitrust is going to happen there. So our prediction is there's going to be something resembling either a spin or antitrust in 2019, and that the way to fix the kind of 90% market share problem of Google is to force a breakup of YouTube, as we would imagine in the first meeting or the first strategy meeting at YouTube, they might decide to go into text search to try and meet their ambitious growth needs. That if you want to diminish the monopoly power of Google, you should set the second most powerful search engine loose on Google, which is YouTube, and then Google would probably go into video, and they'd be competitors, which we think would be a good thing. Probably, I keep saying our big prediction, but I do think this is our big prediction, is that we're going to see this confluence of big tech, retail companies, and healthcare. And the key to Facebook and Google's success was this giant $60 billion bleeding carcass called broadcast television that was getting less and less effective every year, raising its prices, sticking their chin out, the definition of disruption, and the kind of the biggest market in the world that is most, if you will, disruptible is healthcare. Their greed glands are going here. Do you think Best Buy comes in? Who is it? Is it retail comes in? Is it big tech comes in? Is it Apple? Who do you think kind of fires the first shot here?
Well, I think everybody's kind of starting to kind of scratch around the edges here. As you said, huge prize. This is probably, the single biggest problem that needs to be solved. There's a ton of money in it. There's also kind of a ton of goodwill, which, as we've talked about, these companies need that goodwill. So you see Google investing in kind of all of these pet projects. Apple has made huge inroads into health, both through some of the iPhone, the watch, and then some of the hires that they've made. Facebook, a lot of that has been more philanthropy, for lack of a better term, but we'll see kind of what they do. And I would predict that the player that's most successful there is Amazon. If you look at, they have the workforce that they need to insure, so they have a vested financial interest in figuring this stuff out. And you've already kind of seen them kind of pull some of their Jedi mind tricks when they enter health or they announce that they're entering health, and all of a sudden you see the CVSs, you see the Aetnas, you see everyone kind of starting, not only their stocks starting to react, but then you start to see some major M&A activity.
Yeah, so the big four, Facebook, no one's going to let Facebook know their cholesterol levels or anything about their health. No one trusts them for good reason. Apple, I think, is overrated from a healthcare standpoint. I think a lot of the data they collect off the watch is more show than actually anything that interesting. And their investors are addicted to profits, which is a bad thing. And then we have Google, feels like a natural, but a lot of their healthcare stuff has been more, it feels like more moonshot, kind of CSR. Amazon has the core competence here. They have the willingness and ability to lose billions of dollars, which is what will be required to go big into these industries. I think it's going to be in insurance. I think Prime members are going to be offered a chance to insure their families at 50% of their current price. They know your body mass index because they know your clothes size, they know your food, they know the relationships you're in, they know your economic level, all the indicators of how healthy you are. And they're going to skim the 10% healthiest households in America and basically give them an amazing deal, but also create an ecosystem where health insurance for everybody else is more expensive, because the dirty secret of insurance is find a bunch of young, healthy people and get them to subsidize old, unhealthy people. And Amazon's going to figure out a way to sit on top of that data set and take all those people off the table. So our prediction is that Amazon, more than any other company, is going to move into healthcare. RUNDLE, our other big prediction, recurring revenue bundle. Everyone is going to go after this. We think brands are going to consolidate your healthcare, your fitness, your travel, your luxury, and one brand's going to be sort of the lead dog and try and recreate this Prime-like offering.
Yep. Everyone's been going after Prime for years. The challenge is that they've been doing it kind of as a single institution, which is almost impossible to match kind of the scale that's now been packaged into Amazon's offering. We've seen them be able to raise prices, now $119, which is effectively just $2 billion in incremental profit for them. And you're starting to see kind of some interesting offerings emerge. Restoration hardware, like Sniper retail offering, but over 90% of their consumers are RH Grey Card members, which they become very loyal to Restoration Hardware, not just kind of for one-off purchases, but start to buy a whole host of different categories from them.
Yeah, Gary Friedman, arguably the best merchant of the last 20 years, and everyone said he was a technology Luddite, but the reality is he's very innovative. This membership program, recurring revenue is probably up 20 or 30% the last few years, but the stock's up 150% because the market loves recurring revenue relationships.
Yeah, I think the RUNDLE is likely to occur at the high end, where really,
so LVMH,
an LVMH type offering where luxury goods really not available on Amazon. And at the low end, Walmart's a perfect candidate because if you could give somebody discounts on gas, their cell phone, all of kind of
maybe even their healthcare.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, it would be a great move for them.
Another prediction of ours is woke as a business strategy. All of these brands deciding that they're progressives. We're a little bit cynical. If you look at where the money is, same-sex households over-index on income. 70% of high school valedictorians are females. College grads make 2 to 3x more. Show me a same-sex household with a high school valedictorian that's also a college grad. I'll show you a Democrat. All of a sudden, these companies are finding progressive values. Maybe it's principled, but they're just following the money. You're going to see a ton of companies pull a Nike, a Land O'Lakes, a Dick's, and decide to talk about their progressive values, because while the government right now is largely influenced or even controlled by red states and conservatives, the reality is the majority of the money or income gains have gone to progressives.
Completely agree.
We're holding on to that. We're taking a victory lap. We said that the Amazon HQ2 circus show was a con, not a contest. We predicted that it would be DC or New York. Who knew? We were right on both. Good for us. Yay. And by the way, the Bezos happen to own homes within 6 miles of both of their new headquarters. What a shocker. We think this is an abuse of the Commonwealth and reflects that Mr. Bezos and the board of Amazon lack character and code. There you go. The media circus, genius. absolute genius. If they had put out a press release saying we're opening 2 more offices, big yawn. Instead, they gamify it, called HQ2. They got more media hits than the Chinese tariffs or the story on the Chinese tariffs. Another big prediction, identity. We think it's going to be huge. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think you only have to look to China to basically understand that identity is kind of where it's at. And that when you can create these closed loop ecosystems where you actually can verify, for lack of a better term, a consumer's identity, it's just an unbelievable competitive advantage.
The other thing is we talked about the world being a better place last year. That if you look at the trajectory of infection or disease or infant mortality, that everything every year tends to head in the right way. So we said, despite all our dour predictions, that the world would become a better place. And unfortunately, Maureen, I think we got that wrong. I think it's been a bad year. More people this year will die from opioid overdose than died in the entire Vietnam conflict. For the first time in the history of the U.S., life expectancy has gone down 3 years in a row in what would be considered a non-war era. So unfortunately, the world is not becoming a better place. We're never supposed to talk about politics, but we never listen to what we're supposed to do. Feels like we're no longer the good guys. Yeah. All this terrible imagery and coarseness of our dialogue and a lack of empathy for others. So, but we'll make that prediction for 2019. 2019, Maureen, that's the year we're the good guys again.